players. Now you know what I'm doing. Watch the songs. Mike's off.
Okay, I'm going to open the regular meeting of the Citrus County School Board. I've got a little something to read here in our opening exercise. See if you can figure out who said this. Okay, I'll tell you at the end. I must study politics and war, that my sons may have the liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. John Adams, second President of these United States. Let's stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we approve the agenda, I've handed out an addendum. What I did with mine. Out-of-state travel, thank you. Out-of-state travel, but to be added to the agenda. And I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda with this added.
I move to adopt the agenda with the out-of-state travel addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Citizens' comments. Do you have any citizens with any comments? Thank you. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Powers. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, presentation. Oh, no. Recognition of donations. Ms. Verderami, do you have that?
Yes, ma'am. I do.
Thank you.
Today we have several donations that are accepted on the consent agenda. The first one being a donation of $600 to Sharon Jackson Scholarship Fund from David Jackson. A donation of $1,500 to the Marine Science Station from Balls Rectal Drugs. A donation, $500 donation to the Marine Science Station from Stephen Eckhart and Sandra Fisher. A $500 donation to Marine Science Station from Michael Lewinsky, Environmental Consultants. Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
Thank you. Okay, now this is presentation. I don't have any idea what we're presenting. No presentation, all right. Business and support services. Mr. Blocker or Mr. Burkhoff? And while he's coming up, let me say that I will be abstaining from voting pursuant to Florida Statute 112.3143 as I perceive a potential conflict in this matter.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Himmel, school board members. I'm here to request approval of Phase 1 Crystal River High change order number 18.
I move to approve Phase 1 Crystal River High change order number 18.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Powers and a second by Mr. Kennedy. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item is to request approval of the Phase 2 Crystal River High change order number 16.
I move approval of Phase 2 Crystal River High change order number 15.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Powers. Do we have any questions or comments? All those,
I would say money saved.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0.
They all came in.
Yeah, they did. Thank you, Mr. Burkhoff. Finance, Ms. Rendio. How many days do you have left?
I'm not counting.
Oh, okay.
I would like to, first of all, good afternoon. I'd like to ask the board to approve the financial, operational, and federal single audit report of the Citrus County School District for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2012. I'll draw your attention to a few items in the audit. On page 62, you'll see that the audit was an unqualified audit. That's the best type of audit to have, so that was very good. On page I, at the beginning, the audit disclosed that the district's basic financial statements were presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with prescribed financial reporting standards, and the audit did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting that the auditors consider to be material weaknesses. With that said, they did have several findings, and I'll briefly go over those with you. First finding was the board had not established a documented process to identify instructional personnel entitled to differentiated pay. And our response to that is this is something that we're working on with Race to the Top, and in negotiations with the union that will be resolved in the future.
Isn't it also not required until 2014?
Differentiated pay has been around for a while. We've actually addressed that issue, what we believe is the union negotiation, and differentiating between different levels of instruction, like administrators, high school principal is paid more than middle school or elementary. Same with like instructional personnel, someone gets supplements for some of the differentiation. The auditor has not agreed with that. And then go further now to do any type of additional negotiations, it has to go through the salary changes. Let's go through negotiations. The union currently right now and us are kind of in a standstill, not knowing how to proceed with the current pay scale that we all have presented to in front of us in reference to performance pay. So it's kind of in a holding pattern.
So it's an expansion of the definition of differentiated pay. It used to be like we were talking about, the principles at different levels and stuff, but now we're talking about performance, so it's an expansion.
Correct. We really can't address that issue
Because it's not.
The second finding had to do with the use of ad valorem tax funds out of the capital fund. We are allowed to use capital funds for maintaining our buildings, new construction. With that said, we cannot pay salaries out of the capital fund. So some of these projects we pay out of the general fund and then reimburse out of the capital fund. The auditors felt that we had maybe stretched the limits of the understanding as far as what we can pay out of general fund and the capital fund. And with that said, the DOE even put out a memo, trying to find it here, that said, their technical assistance note said that from the Office of Funding Financial Reporting, confusion concerning these revisions has resulted in audit findings for several Florida schools. There's definitely confusion about what we can and cannot do. We have argued this. At this point, we're waiting for the DOE. The auditors will send this to the DOE, and we'll wait to see what the DOE, how they respond to this. In the meantime, we will not be using that transfer for some of these projects that they cited until we get more clarity on these issues. The other next two findings had to do with the IT department and just controls as far as who has access to the system, and some of those findings they didn't even share with us because of the sensitivity of letting security issues out. And then the last finding was a federal finding, and it had to do with our private schools and allowing them to partake in our federal grants. We do invite them to be part of the federal grants. This one grant that they drew attention to had to do with the grant that we use for our high school students. The private schools didn't have high schools, so they were Pope John Paul Catholic, only had elementary, middle school students, so they didn't participate, but because we were using the grant for high school students, but we will make sure that they are invited to participate whenever we have federal grants that they can partake in.
And what about Seven Rivers?
Yes, any of the private schools.
Okay.
And when you say participate, do you mean write a grant individually themselves, or
No.
be part of it?
Be part of the grants that we write.
But how could they do that, since all of our grants are written specifically for our, using our instructional staff and monitoring and all of that? How could we have any understanding of what's going on in the other schools and how they use their grant money?
I think when we get the grants, particularly like the Title I grant, we ask the private schools if they'd like to participate in the grants. Some of them that are more narrow in scope, they maybe can't participate, but I think we need to invite them to have the opportunity.
If they participate, though, they have to go by the federal rules, is that right? So some, just because of what federal rules are, couldn't participate.
We have a meeting every spring in which schools that would like to participate in federal grants that we have, and I'll just name one that I'm familiar with, is Title II. And we provide funds to schools when they ask for it, but yes, ma'am, they do have to follow all the guidelines. In other words, they have to provide us with their information that we would then give to the Department of Education when we're writing our grant. I'll give you one example, which we actually work with one of our private schools in providing them training dollars for their principal and for their teachers. The principal actually goes for brain-based research, and that's just one example of how we actually provide funds to that school that are federal dollars for them to be able to participate in principal training.
So they come to our school and
They may, but no, sometimes they go and they actually, like for example, the one that I just mentioned is out in California. They actually participate in that training. Okay?
So the federal dollars would be just to all the students in the county, whereas state dollars would be specific to the public schools.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the Seven Rivers question also, they did not want to participate in the grants. So when you mentioned they do have high school students, but they did not want to participate. John Paul Catholic did want to participate, but they didn't have high school students. So
Right.
the other one I did skip over was adult general education classes. There was a question about when students withdraw that they are getting recorded properly in the system, and this was primarily a WTI issue, and they were addressing it. And particularly, they met with Skyward too. Hopefully, they can tighten up some of their controls there. Do you have any questions?
That control, does that have to do with 4-year graduates versus 5-year graduates? Early graduation?
This issue had more to do with after-school program the high school students were participating in.
All right.
There's also, with Skyward, calculating and capturing the hours of the workforce as well. Actually, I had a conversation with Kevin from Skyward, initial salesperson. They're trying to wrap their arms around and reprogram their system to be able to help WTI calculate those hours for video recording right now. So it's continually being worked on to address and enhance the system.
Are they capturing classes on computer also?
Yes, all the hours that people attend. It's just that workforce hours are calculated and captured differently than what FTE.
All right, I need a motion to approve the financial, operational, and federal single audit report of the Citrus County District School Board for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2012.
I move to approve what you just read.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
Next, I'd like to ask the board to approve budget amendment number 6 for February 2013. Some of the highlights in the general fund. We have $9,518 of offsetting new revenue and expenditures. And then the remainder of the expenditures are increases in some of the projects. For example, our sick leave bank, we had increased that budget by $68,000. ROTC, the actuals were at $22,000, a little more than we had anticipated. This will impact the general fund balance by a decrease of $141,726. Food service, there was an increase in their revenue due to the credit card rebate and sale of surplus items in their department. Special revenue, federal funds, those were just matching increases in grants. And in the capital funds, you'll see quite a bit of activity there. This is mostly cleaning up some things since we got approval to pay for the remainder of the Crystal River High School project out of the Crystal River Primary School bond. We've been moving funds around, so we're just kind of cleaning some things up there.
Do you have a motion?
Move approval of the budget amendment number 6.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Deutschman, a second by Mr. Kennedy. Do we have any further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is to approve the bid 2013-31 Lecanto High School re-roof to Roof USA.
Move to approve the bid 2013-31 LA for Lecanto High School, the re-roof USA.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Powers and a second by Mr. Kennedy. Do we have any further questions or comments?
I asked if it was full. I just wanted to revisit to our thoughts about metal roofing and what we plan in the future, so maybe if you could just review that for us. It doesn't apply to this, but in the future, we did have a plan, so.
Sure. You may recall some years back when Citrus Springs Middle School re-roofing was next in line, that we started on that design and then came to you with alternatives, one of which was a metal roof. The direction given was to proceed with the metal roof, and that is still what is budgeted for that school. However, other schools have come in front of that, so that school has been pushed further out. But as I talked with Mrs. Powers, we certainly could move ahead next year. Pleasant Grove Elementary is currently scheduled for a new roof. As a part of the design, to ask the architect to do a preliminary estimate of what would be involved in going to a metal roof on that school.
And why would you do that?
Well, as Mrs. Powers brought up, there's a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, of course. Metal roofs typically cost more and last longer. Of course, there's good metal roofs and bad metal roofs and everything in between. Especially, so when you're talking about a metal roof versus a shingle replacement, since the shingle replacement is a lot less than the built-up replacement, there is a big cost disparity in that case. In the case of a flat roof, it's not so much. However, what you get into with the flat roofs is how do you create the slope, and also in our case we have a lot of rooftop air conditioners and vent fans.
So that school wasn't designed to have a sloped roof or a metal roof.
Correct.
So why are we pursuing that?
It is possible, and some people do retrofit flat roofs with sloped roofs.
Is there a cost to us to find this out?
Well, it would be, I believe, in the scope of what we would do. Like this last year, the consultant that we work with typically as a part of design looks at different alternatives, as he did this year, and should we ask him to do that, I believe he would do it without with negligible increase in the contract fee.
Sort of to see the cost comparison, because you have the asphalt, which has a much shorter life, and then with the longer life, as we said, if it's a good one. And then the use of electricity, air conditioning, all that sort of thing. Over a span of years, it can be much less with the metal, even though the initial cost is going to be more. So it's just to see a comparison of the two and to see which serves us better as a school system. To keep doing the same thing over and over again, or should we go to a metal? And the buildup is, at least on homes, it's not that expensive if you have to raise a few inches and then put a metal roof on. And we can see what it will do on a school. But it's merely saving money. And often, I know in one place that I own, the electricity bill per month is $88. Have a lot of insulation and a metal roof on it, and it contributes to that low amount, where other places are much more expensive than that. So just to save money for the school system, we take a look at it and see what works, what would be the best for us.
Am I missing something? Was there a committee meeting? Is there a committee that's
We
working on
talked about
long-range
it
planning
about
committee?
about a year ago or something.
Correct.
We're not in the design phase yet.
Okay,
Now, he said when they do get ready for that, he can.
That's an option that we can explore with the consultant.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, in the schematic design phase.
But that would all come back to the board before it ever got started.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
kind of hate for us to go off on these ideas that we're going to go pursue something when nobody has decided that's a good idea to pursue that, and then bring it to us as an option, like as if we asked for it.
That was the discussion we had, it was about a year ago, was it, when we had, or maybe it's longer than that, when all of a sudden discussed the possibility of exploring that to see if we were going to be able to save money.
That was such a spring middle school.
Correct.
That
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't remember that while I've been on.
It might have been longer ago.
Yeah, it was longer than I thought when I look back at it.
Was it?
but 3-4 years, I think.
But right now, we don't have that, there's not a roof that we're looking to study to do that at this point.
He just said yes. He said Pleasant Grove.
Well, at your discretion, when we bring, assuming the budget is approved and we proceed with the 5-year re-roofing plan, next year's budget includes re-roofing Pleasant Grove Elementary. It's been identified as the next one needing re-roofing.
And is that a metal roof now?
No, it's flat. I'm
Okay.
just suggesting as a part of design, if you're so inclined, we can
To look at the
include in
cost.
that architect's scope just a very straightforward, this is what we think,
And I think
money-wise.
there's also something else, you had the asphalt, what was that second,
The one we're doing this year.
Yeah, we're going to a PVC single ply
and that was
on
another
this
thing,
year's,
just to-
yeah.
Just again, to see.
But this Lecanto was something that had been planned.
Oh, yes, yes,
This is part of the 5-year.
yes,
All right.
yes, ma'am.
And Ms. Barkoff, on Lecanto, if I recall, there's quite a bit of taking off of the existing
Correct.
roof. There's been quite a few layers there of roof that
Right.
we've been re-roofing over the years. And you're taking that down, if I
Right.
recall, almost right down to the bare.
Correct, down to the deck,
Doing a
new
fresh-
insulation, yes.
Right.
That'd be something we could maybe avoid if we chose to take a way to do it.
I gotta tell you, my experience with commercial on metal roofs, there's as many good ones, there's just as many bad
And that's
ones.
exactly.
And that's what concerns me of looking at that. And when we have to pitch a roof and it's not designed for it, I feel like we're just asking for new challenges there. But I think it's worth studying. I mean, if it's not gonna cost us anything to study it, I think that's worth, we can add that to the scope of it.
There's such a range in asphalt. It's
Same
the cheap
thing.
and the
Yeah.
expensive, so whichever way we can save the school system money is something we should look at.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any more questions or comments?
This has got nothing to do with Lecanto High School roof. The Lecanto High School roof is not a question being
No,
questioned.
no,
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
Next item is to approve the award of bid 2013-33 custodial supplies to the various vendors as attached to the board agenda request.
We have a motion?
I'll move approval of bid number 2013-33, custodial supplies to various vendors.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Deutschman. Yes, Ms. Powers?
Yes, number 20, the clocks. I think we had,
Yeah, those are for replacement, so when the classroom clocks go down, the custodian, this is on their supply list where they can
and I
actually.
think we had some parents in the audience one time that were asking about, okay, what kind of clocks do you have in the school system? How are the children being taught? What kind of clocks are these? Like that, so they're not the digital kind, they're the ones that have the numbers?
12-inch round, just like that, battery operated.
Okay, and so they have the numbers on them, and so the parents will be
And
very
John,
pleased.
Right? Yep, that's correct.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. All right, Human Resources, Mr. Bishop.
Good afternoon. I'd like to request the board's approval of the instructional support recommendations as outlined on the Golden Rod.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move approval of instructional support personnel as recommended.
And a second? Thank you, Ms. Deutschman. Do we have any questions or comments?
Really, there's so many great people. And Amber McLean is.
Tell them they can't leave.
Where is?
I believe she wants to stay home now.
Oh, she had a baby.
That's correct.
You know, these are our homegrown kids.
Yes, ma'am. What high school
Mm.
there?
I'm gonna miss Jason Longton at Christopher High School.
Where's he going? Virtual school.
Virtual school.
Wait a minute, doesn't he teach
Sam?
Singing.
okay?
Of
How
course.
do you do that virtually?
I don't know. They do the same way they do PE.
Actually, I think the singing, they might be able to do this here.
Mr. Kennedy has a patent on that.
That's right. We're doing an app.
Stay here?
His wife does that, teaches for virtual.
Well, that's perfect. We're still our teachers.
Yes, they are. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further comments?
Is there a line item detail? No,
No.
All right.
All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
The next item, I would request the board's approval to approve the appointment of Charisse K. Ernest, Director of Risk Management and Employee Relations, effective April 10th, 2013.
It would be my great honor to move to approve charisse Cernich as Director of Risk Management and Employee Relations.
Second.
April 10th.
We have a motion by Ms. Deutschman and a second by Ms. Powers. Do we have any questions or comments?
Would she mind cloning herself before she does?
Cloning. Could we get a clone of you, Ms. Cernich?
Good choice, Ms. Hemmel.
Very good
She's going
choice.
to do a great job.
Yes, she is. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries
I'm always
4-0.
when I read her resume, reminding myself that she used to be a police officer. I remember that.
The next item, I'd like to request the board's approval of the job descriptions for the food service assistant, the assistant food service manager, the food services manager at elementary, and food service manager at the secondary.
Do we have a motion?
On the approval of the job descriptions for the food services, various managers.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
So explain.
What we're doing is just cleaning up some language with all the meal pattern changes and everything. It just gives people a more defined job description on what they're supposed to be doing. So it was cleaned up. This was back in 1998 that these job descriptions were approved. And with all the changes we go through, we felt it necessary to give a more defined job description on what they're supposed to be doing. So that's really all it was.
But is anything really changing for that?
Certain duties that they have to do, we no longer do. We don't bring in fresh produce and start cleaning it all ourselves and all. There's a lot more convenience that we have to do. So again, to help them do their jobs better and know what we expect of them, we just cleaned up some language, really.
You do like little teaching components, because I know you're always making really interesting changes, and do you bring staff in and teach them about the...
Oh, absolutely. We have managers meetings as well as staff meetings, and any menu changes that we make or any new item that we bring out there, we take pictures of it, just as you saw this afternoon, and we tell them exactly how we want it placed in the
Thank you
packaging.
for that. That was marvelous.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's something that...
Full-time food tester.
Yes. I'm fortunate to have Mike Kenny and Mrs. Himmel at my beck and call to be able to taste food items, but we thank you for tasting them as well, so you know what we're serving. But it's important. Everything is visual nowadays with kids, so the more you're able to market and show them what they usually expect out there in the private sector, that's what helps to get them to eat more.
This drink was incredible.
Isn't it? And
With
it counts
sweet
as,
potato
yes, it
as
counts
the
as a
first thing
vegetable.
on it.
So if they won't eat their vegetables, I guarantee they go and drink their vegetables. So, neat items.
And the items you bring in, honestly, are better than the items you get most any other place.
Well, thank you for saying that. We appreciate that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any more comments? All those,
The only thing I just wanted to say, Mr. Stone, you gave a presentation at one of our SAC at Forest Ridge recently, and he got to again show this, show, among other things, you know, the Lunchable comparison of what you offer for $2 versus what you can buy in the grocery store. And having bought quite a few of those Lunchables in the past, your lunches are much more superior to that and healthier. And also what you're doing for our diabetic students and providing options, and for our parents. So thank you for doing that. So I just wanted to
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
all right.
Anything else I can answer for you?
He has not. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Mr.
Before
Pistone.
Mr. Stone sits down, you all need to know that he's been recognized and selected by the state as the director, food service director in the state of Florida.
Of the year.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Everything for Mr. Blocker.
I'll be on it. Oh.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, risk management. Ms. Ernest.
Well, I gave her a break for the first meeting.
Oh, okay.
I'm here to ask for the approval of the agreement between Citrus County School Board and the TSA Consulting Group.
Mr. Blocker, could we do a timeout? I need to go back to Mr. Pistone's and do the out-of-travel SNA Leadership Conference.
Sure, go ahead.
I added it to the agenda and then I forgot about it. Okay. We need a motion to approve the out-of-state SNA Leadership Conference.
I move to approve the out-of-state travel for SNA Leadership Conference.
You have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We have a motion by Ms. Powers and a second by Mr. Kennedy. Do you have any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
And if I may make a
Thank
comment
you.
on that,
Yes.
and Mr. Fasoni's correct me if I'm speaking improperly here, but I believe that's for Gwen Fryer, his employee who is going as a national representative of the,
Yeah, she was the only one selected by the state of Florida to attend this leadership conference, a national conference where they select one person from every state as a future leader of school food service. So it's kudos for Gwen Fryer as well. So good things are happening in Citrus County.
Very good.
kudos for the entire food service department. You know,
Yes. Thank you. And the food tasters. Where would we be without our food tasters?
We've been the food tasters sometimes.
And you will.
We love summertime, because that's when everybody changes the menu.
And Mr. Pistone, I believe you said that, by the way, to get a food on the menu, what percentage do the students actually have to?
75% must approve the item before we'll add it to the menu.
So we
And how do they do this?
We taste test with them. We'll go to the various different grade levels, and we bring the food item in there, and then they'll score it, taste, texture, color, and then once we get all of that, we'll tally them up, and as long as there's a 75% approval rating, we will then add it to the menus. If they don't like it, we're not bringing it in.
And if I'm an elementary school student, do I test for, do I food test for the high school?
No, that's probably not a good thing, because sometimes we have a little difference there, but our menus don't vary too much, just portion sizes from the elementary to the high school.
That's why he was skewed when he used us as testers, because we love everything else.
They cover all grade levels.
I know, looking at us, you don't think we do.
Thank you, Mr. Blocker.
Yes, ma'am.
So we need a motion to approve the agreement between Citrus County School Board and TSA Consulting Group.
I move approval for the agreement between Citrus County School Board and TSA Consulting Group.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Deutschman. We have a motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Deutschman. Do we have any questions or comments?
Mr. Falk, how is the information given to the employees?
The employees receive a booklet every year that's printed by TSA that outlines the specific plans, the maximum amounts that they put into a 403B and a 457, and all the rules and regs are in here, and that's what TSA, they manage it for us, they make sure we're in compliance with the IRS regulations, they gather all the record keeping from all the different vendors that we have, the 5 or 6 different 403B providers and 457 providers, and they keep us in total compliance with the IRS.
And if one of the employees have a question, who would they call?
It tells them right here they can contact TSA directly, or they can go down to the risk management department and start the process there.
Okay, good.
And that's also the same that's on the website where they click on it?
Correct.
Because I use that obviously a lot too.
And then they can, select their 403B, either be Mass Mutual through Edward Jones, or the credit union, or AIG, I think it's a different name now. Ing, they're another provider, or Fidelity. So there's many choices out there for them to go to. And they're just the record-keeping compliance department for us.
Mr. Blocker, with the new legislation, I'm not sure how it's going to go with FRS and requiring some employees have to participate in a retirement plan instead of FRS. Would it be the same sort of scenario, these same kind of vendors, or would it be open to anybody in the world that want to choose?
Well, I haven't seen the entire language, but if it's like it is today, I mean, there is a separate investment plan that you have a certain choice within the FRS investment plan of their funds that they offer.
Okay.
They're not the same ones that we offer.
So they could choose either one, you think? Or if you're out of FRS,
Well, you can always do
have to ours?
403B. That's a separate retirement that's self-funded. The FRS is a different retirement fund.
Okay, well, they made it sound like the
They want to be-
employees were going to have to be their own investment counselors.
There are counselors that are available for them through the 800 number.
But with our providing these 5 vendors, then we're sort of selecting them and thinking, do we pre-screen them?
Right.
And these are ones that we've approved of, they're not
Right.
just people that want to be on our list. So we
Right.
actually have done a little bit of the investment counseling.
Well, we did due
Work.
diligence.
Okay,
Yes.
so do you think that scenario would fall under, that employees would be allowed to access vendors through a similar situation, that we would have already a list of 3 or 4 that we have approved of?
For the FRS investment plan,
Is that what they're calling it?
that's what they have now. I don't assume it's going to change. I assume you're going to go through that same avenue.
Well,
Because currently you have the
legislation?
You have the defined plan, which, if you work so many years, you get so many % of your salary.
Right.
Or you have the investment plan, which you
Okay.
invest in they have multiple choices of funds, whether it be bond funds, stock funds, et cetera, and then you earn your return on the dollars that you put in there.
Okay, so I think the idea is that new employees would not be allowed to participate in FRS.
In the defined,
And it defines,
it would be in a
entitled
401.
to Florida retirement, it would all be self-funded, it would be an investment plan that you would just draw money out at your own discretion rather than monthly checks like FRS operates. And it wouldn't be to your lifetime until the money's out, until you run out of money. Like any of the rest of us in the real world that
Yes,
have
that's correct.
our own pension plans. And I believe that elected people were going to be required to be in that investment plan as well.
Right, I think they also said they were going to reduce the,
2% instead of 3%, I don't know.
It's the difference between a defined contribution and a defined benefit, is it not?
Correct. The defined benefit is what you get after so many years of service. Contribution for the investment plan, you put money in and it grows based on whatever fund you choose.
Okay.
So you don't know how much money typically at the end of the day, but then you can annuitize it, they can pay you a monthly salary, et cetera, et cetera.
And at FRS, if you die the next day after you retire and you haven't specified, if you have a spouse, I guess, that inherits your money, but what about kids?
Well, it depends on there's 4 different options.
Yeah.
It depends on how you choose it, how you set up your will and things like that.
I know there's a lot of distress in the state when they talked about this. I know Will Weatherall's Weatherford is determined to get rid of FRS as much as he can, so.
Well, he wants to get rid of the defined.
Well, it's a payout,
The
yes, the
investment
payout,
plan
right.
is what he wants everyone to go to. So, and the issue is if everyone goes into the investment plan, you don't know how much money you're gonna have to be able to fund the retirees, you know, who are still got 10 years to go or whatever, and their retirement, because on the defined side.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some issues that, of course, they're probably looking out for today and not tomorrow.
Are you following that at all?
Absolutely. We were just up in Tallahassee last week on some of the conversations we had.
Okay.
But there's 2 different versions, House and the Senate out there. They're similar, but they're different.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any more questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Budget update.
You said music.
Ta-da.
Like a drum roll?
We are, of course, watching the Senate and the House. The versions are similar, not many differences. Total dollars, there's a little bit of difference, which will actually be probably one of the closest we've seen in some time, where they can conference and work all that out. There's some differences on what they're putting in different line items, but the total pool is pretty much close to where I don't think it's going to be hard to conference. There is some legislation, just so you know, there's a bunch of charter bills. And one of the charter bills, since it writes in there, since the districts are not receiving PICO money, we may be allowed to go up to the 2 mills again for capital. That's one of the bills out there. There's another bill out there that may,
How are they proposing to get there, to go up to 2 mills?
we would be allowed by the board, like we used to be, instead of 1.5 would be a 2. That's one of the charter bills. There's several charter bills. They're probably all going to be mixed and matched, and at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to come out in the wash, but that's one out there. The other one is where we give the board by supermajority again the authority to raise the 0.25. That's out there too, and they haven't gone away. They're still making their way through, so we don't know.
If there's only 4 of us, can we still have a supermajority?
I would think 3 out of 4 would be super, wouldn't it?
I think so.
So those are the things that are pressing. We should start seeing, we've got the House run out, so we've seen those numbers. It increases us a little bit over around $4 million over the third calculation. The Senate version, we haven't seen the detail yet to see what's out there, so that should be coming out shortly. So the numbers are starting to come in. So hopefully now in the April workshop, we're going to have a lot of information for you, not only a budget update as far as looking at next year's budget, staffing. We're going to talk about the healthcare reform. Those are some big things that we need to look at for next year's budget.
In the April workshop?
Correct, 2 weeks from now.
Mr. Blocker, I know we've all been reading, trying to keep up with the $2,500 amount that has been allocated, funded, or
Tossed about.
Exactly, thank you. And the House is pretty much, as I understand it, has made it clear they're going to make sure that it's still tied to 736 Student Success Act for it to be done in order to roll it out, is my understanding. We'd still have to bargain it, and it would still have to meet Student Success Act at this
As far
point.
as performance pay.
As far as
I think
performance
half of
pay.
it, they said half of it would have to go to performance pay, the other half would not, I believe is what I read.
And that part didn't make sense to me, and that's what I didn't say, because I thought it was half of the performance. I mean, that 50% of your
2,500, what I looked at.
of the amount. I still thought it was the evaluation.
I looked at the amount, like half of it could be bargained as an increase, the other half had to be based on performance. Now, on the other side, I think they're leaving it up to the discretion of the districts.
Right. Which would mean, in theory, am I assuming that they're just saying that they would allocate that to us?
Yeah.
And then at that point, there's kind of sending it with, that was the intention, but
Correct. That's correct.
districts could, in theory, then do.
You have to bargain it through the collective bargaining process, so, you know, what works out in the wash, we're yet to see, but there's money there, it's just, you know, how they're gonna earmark it, and that's the problem right now.
But again, it's money for this year, not necessarily money.
That's one of the comments that's
Ongoing.
been brought up to them, that it's now recurring expense that they have to fund every year. And just to let you know, last week, Ms. Himmel and I did travel to Tallahassee, met with about, 8 or 10 legislators, their aides, trying to do what we could to get support to give us back the money we lost this year from the prior period adjustment, the discretionary millage, and the capital outlay, about $2.5 million in total, but Ms. Himmel, I think we made good ground.
We had good reception.
So
We won't know for long.
Right. So
Would that be a separate bill that they'd have to pass?
it would be in the budget. Yeah. So we worked the halls all day Thursday trying to solicit support for that initiative. So we think we did pretty good.
Very good.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Plotter.
Good afternoon. I'm going to defer to Dr. Geddes for the instructional, the technology plan. Is that all right?
That's great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We are here today to ask your approval of the district technology plan that we introduced to you, and I believe in March, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Fairly comprehensive 3-year plan. We're asking for funding to cover 2013, 2014 school year, part of the one-to-one expansion. So I don't know what you need. I do have copies of the plan. I do have.
I had a question.
Kenny's also brought the capital budget, a preliminary for that to show you how it works under the capital budget.
And the question I have is really a pretty simple one. It was about the case that,
Yes.
that held the computer.
Yeah.
And someone asked me at dinner over the weekend, are y'all gonna get the good cases or are you gonna get the ones that are inexpensive and they're all gonna break? And so that's the question I asked.
It's a very good question, Mrs. Powers. Beginning of this year, a year ago, as we considered that for the Citrus Springs Middle School iPad pilot, there were actually two. We researched that fairly extensively. There were two options that kind of surfaced to the top. One was called the OtterBox, and then the other was by a company called Griffin. I believe it was called the Defender. And very comparable, both made to military specifications. This is OtterBox that you reference on just a phone. Very tough, durable. It's got a plastic screen. So, without question, we would, unless something better emerges, be putting one of those two options onto those devices. So, and they honestly have held up extremely well in terms of protecting the device.
Yeah, Dr. Geddes, I know we kind of, when we started this, the national average seemed to be on a one-to-one pilot, about 5% damage lost, born, and I think we were like under 2%.
Very low, yes.
A question too that's come up with those is because they're kind of used more intensively than maybe even their design. I know this year the schools kind of referenced that, okay, maybe they kind of smell, they kind of stink, they've got lots of students' cooties all over them. Have we talked about how we maybe deal with that? Do we refresh those? Do we also, what are we doing on and I know this is new territory, but I'm wondering too, what are we doing to ensure they're protect it again as part of the, wiping out of that iPad and getting it ready for the next student?
In terms of the case, has been reported to me that they're getting a little bit, some of them on the rank side. And in fact, one suggestion was, I wonder if we can even boil the covers or something. They're like rubber. But I'm thinking, ugh. Anyway, we didn't anticipate having to replace those covers, so we haven't budgeted for that. And so my suggestion to the school is that we're just going to have to clean them up with alcohol or whatever, bleach or whatever's going to take the very best way we can. We paid, yes ma'am.
Yesterday I did that with mine. Soap and water. Soap and water only. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect result. Yes, soap and water with
Because
the
there's a
honor box.
Yeah, that seemed to do okay.
Oh, absolutely perfect.
So there's going to be some maintenance involved. In terms
Service hours.
yes, in terms of the data and wiping them clean, we have a good mechanism in place for that using Apple Configurator and AirWatch.
So are you going to take them apart, clean?
They will physically have to be
Covers and then put them all back together?
yes. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons we're coming before you now for discussion and approval of this technology plan. As we move forward, there's going to be a lot of work that takes place between now and the start of school for the coming year in preparation. And a lot of that is ordering devices, unboxing covers, installing covers, preparing software, teacher training. We have a pretty detailed game plan, but it's time-based. And so we need to start on that as soon as we can. So that's why we're actually coming to you, asking for approval of the plan at this point in time, with funding related to 13-14.
And we can still have discussion, but if the board doesn't mind indulging me, I would like to make the recommendation that we approve the technology plan and the related capital budget for the 2013-2014 school year.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Powers. I'm sure we have further comments.
I think we had so much discussion last time, Dr. Getty. Quite frankly, I was at a meeting last night at the high school and they were talking about the IMS iPads and I was thinking, really? I don't know. We talked about so many things. So refresh us again, because you've just given us, I know it was a very long and detailed plan, but you've really just given us one page. It's a summation. Can you kind of go over that again?
Yes, ma'am. If I can.
Mr. Blocker, did you have something you wanted to interject?
I just want to make sure you understand the preliminary run of the capital budget and what the impact is on meeting the technology plan.
Well, why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
Okay. The spreadsheet essentially goes over the preliminary 5-year work plan for the next 5 years. The first column was the original capital budget this year. The second column in yellow is the one after due. And then the 14 out to the 18 years, the 5-year work plan we're looking at for next year. Where you can see next year's revenue is proposed to be about a total of $50 million, which includes the rollover of the fund balance. If you go out to year 18, that revenue is down to $21 million, so it's $30 million less. Expenses carry down to where at the end of the FY 2018, we got a fund balance of under $5 million. I just want you to understand that. In that, also to fund the technology plan, the Christopher High School Phase 3 of $5 million that we had plugged in has been removed. That project is out. The Dell lease that we had planned on releasing has been taken out, and now we're going to do a buyout, so there's no refresh component. And just know that the revenue, the property values, all that is subject to change based on what happens with the Duke Energy Complex. So I just bring that to your attention to show you preliminarily we can show that we can pay for, but there are some things that we have to be cognizant of and some things that may change.
So you're telling me I'm not getting a gym, is that what you're telling me?
And that's what the plan says. Y'all can discuss whether you get a gym.
Mr. Blocker, one of the things I know that in talking about the needs of one-to-one and the technology and kind of some of the pieces that I know Dr. Geddes is going to talk about in a second, but that it's a matrix of that's pushing this technology initiative, that it's not simply one piece or another. It's what appears to me to be about 4 or 5 different pieces: Common Core, park testing, computer-based testing, the 50% digital mandate. But here's another one that we've often forgot about, and that is virtual school requirement in high school. And they may be listening, but I had a conversation with Mr. Simon and Ms. Nobles about the number of students that we have in high school right now. And of those in high school that are going to be required to take the virtual class option, course option, 82% of our students have not taken it, that are going to have to take it. The cost at our current model of that, just for those students, which that's only 2 years worth, is about $1 million. And that's just those 2 years. That's at our current model that we're delivering it. And then the other question has become is, okay, even if we can change the model in the way we do that, maybe do it in-house more, maybe provide options, we right now don't really have the computers resources in order to offer a virtual course, which now the requirement is we have to provide them the time as well as the hardware to do that.
And you say 1 computer per student, you can't do that too.
No, I'm saying that even just to provide that, as far as providing them the course, we don't have the current number of computer stations to entirely do that right now.
I was just thinking, does it include like a class? I think over at the Citrus Springs Middle School, we saw a class
No.
together using one.
No.
It doesn't.
No. And so that's where the question becomes is that the costs, for example, this is a capital cost, but that would be a general expense, and that would be our general revenue cost that we, again, are not funded for from the state level in order to implement that just one requirement.
Just the $1 million, how was that calculated?
It evidently was the calculation based on I think Florida Virtual losing the FTE and then providing the difference between the FTE and the cost of the course.
That's our FTE?
Our FTE for the virtual course. The bottom line is, in order to provide that, we're going to have an expense for those students. And it's a significant expense with the current model because we don't do that in-house. We contract that out in order to do that. And most of the courses that the students have been taking has been through Florida Virtual in order to offer that.
I think through our partner in Seminole County.
Not necessarily.
I think it's part
It's
of it.
been one.
But I was talking to Mr. Sutton today, I think there's some new ideas, so.
There is some new
There
ideas.
is.
Yeah.
But again, that becomes that, how do we do that? Because even with those new ideas, we have to have those computer stations in there in order to be able to provide it.
Well, we have computer labs, and I think.
And that's what he was saying though, those labs right now aren't available for the number of students.
Well, yeah, you can't have a lab that will provide a computer for a kid in school. So what's your?
The issue is this again becomes that why this initiative becomes so critical is this isn't simply, it's a matrix of issues that we're dealing with. And the cost of this, while we look at what we're taking in order to get, we have the funding issue, we're looking at the hardware capital cost of this. On the other hand, the cost that we are going to be facing, either if we don't do this or even as a result of what we need to implement, far exceeds, I think, what our costs of doing this just in the cap on the revenue side. Because we're going to have to implement pieces that are not funded right now by the state. You know, as we know, just the park standard, to implement that standard and provide the issues of, you know, we talk about the fourth grader that's going to have to be able to type one page in 2 years in order to meet that standard, in order to be able to provide the amount of computers needed just to take the park. We don't really have those right now. And then you add to that even just the Common Core standards that in order to teach that right now, as we know, they've minimally said we're going to have to go to a 2-to-1 just to meet that standard. So, and that's not even getting into the 50% digital curriculum. So I guess what I'm saying is these are roads that we're going to have to go down whether we were to look at them through our capital funding or we look at them through general funding, we're going to be spending these dollars one way or the other.
I understand that when we're talking about this, it's almost like talking about two different worlds. You're talking about the delivery of it, the technical delivery of it, and then you're talking about what is delivered. And my question is, sometimes it seems like the technology is overcoming what is being delivered, and that would make no sense. If you're an educational institution, you're trying to teach chemistry, you're not teaching just the use of the computer. They have to learn chemistry. So I don't see why that one could not use, say, the computer in a classroom setting on a screen and learn the content and not make it dependent on learning how to use the computer in that chemistry class. And maybe you get use it in another class. You have to use it, but not every single time. Wouldn't that, to me, it
Not
doesn't
with
make
Common
sense.
Core, though. Common Core, Mr. Clogger, am I correct? Common Core has intertwined it completely.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we had that presentation today, and how we kind of aligned it with the Common Core and the technology. And Mrs. Tappan actually laid out what standards actually are addressed, and she gave examples of that today.
So we're talking about the music a while ago, about the choir, that we're gonna have the choir on Florida Virtual or something like that, and use the technology to access that. Or opera or something, that doesn't make sense.
You know, you can dissect, you can dissect a frog virtually now, you know, of course.
Oh, in fact, they do it in medicine with people, it scares the devil.
But
Well-
someone asked Mr. Clark, so Mr. Clark, Mary Jane Kaplan was on the conference call, I'm assuming, with you today?
No, we had Mary Jane
Oh,
Tappan
she
come
came
to our
here?
district today, and she met with our principals during our principals meeting
How does she have
today.
time to do all this stuff?
Boy,
It's virtual.
I asked her a couple of weeks ago.
Isn't she like one of the head people in DOE?
Yes,
in
Deputy
the entire
Chancellor.
state?
Deputy
Yeah.
Chancellor.
Yeah.
Yes, and she's offered to come to districts and actually share. We actually asked her to come and share with our principals about the Common Core and implementation, because that's been our primary focus of each of our meetings.
Well, she did mention that when we met with her in December, that there was going to hopefully be a line item for increase in money for technology to school districts, because they were just coming to the realization about the elementary school kids needing the keyboarding skills, but also all the testing requirements. Do we see that in the budget?
There is a line up for virtual, for technology.
But like a significant increase in funding, I thought.
Yeah, for us, we don't have the House bill with me, but yeah, it was a significant increase.
Okay,
It's part of the overall $1
part.
billion that's going to education.
So, Mark,
There's
you're saying-
there's three areas that they're really focusing on. Salaries, security, and technology.
And so if there's an increase in technology, why can't I have my gym?
I don't know how much that is. I'm trying to just show y'all initially,
Go talk to
because
Duke Energy
Dr.
about
Geddes
that.
wants to get this going.
I do too.
Right now, I don't know what the general fund's going to be, and how that much.
The gym could be the new computer lab.
Mark, the question I had, are you saying you're going towards one?
It drops out in the walls.
I'm not sure. I understand.
Delivery of, say, math, science, social studies, whatever it is,
Like our.
100% technological delivery of it.
Well,
You have to be at the computer door to.
I don't know that it's 100% delivery of everything, but every program will have technology infused.
Oh, absolutely, but my question is, we're talking about 100%.
Well, on textbook, that is what they're forcing. They are forcing the delivery, the curriculum delivery to be digital by the way that they've written the law.
Right.
But I think all of us have agreed that I mean, you know, we look at Citrus Springs as a pilot, what we know, what we set out to do, and what really how it's taught is very different.
Exactly.
And I think that's, you know, one of the things I think we've learned, and gentlemen, please elaborate, but is that it's not been about the device, but rather about the curriculum and the way it's been delivered, the instruction that's been done, and in particular the way the collaborativeness, the research base, and the more common core that the tool provides, more than it's been really about a device and that digitalization of that curriculum.
Ms. Powers, to relate it to the instructional setting, it's not an item where you and I have been in before, where we actually make an appointment, go to the technology lab, and then have a spur-of-the-moment instructional lesson that embeds technology. What this initiative provides for is that immediate access to resources that students have not had in the past. So it's not really that, going to a computer lab on a kind of a weekly basis. It's basically that is there, and that was a nice example of what we saw today. Zach Leonard had actually shared with Mary Jane Tappan that it gives him an immediate, and that's really the kind of the shift of our instructional materials. It's going to be that type of thought that textbook is living and it's live, and that core instructional tool, and that's really what we're kind of looking at in this initiative.
In fact, I was watching your slide. You give the delivery through, say, the iPad and stuff like that, but there's a point at which way, hold it, you have to stop. And we have to start discussing the errors that were just made. We have to get human to human.
It's justifying our reasoning for students to be able to verbalize that and then collaborate with one another.
So we're still
and that
doing
technology.
that, we're not going to.
That is correct, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
good, thank heavens.
Thank Albert Einstein.
I wanted to go back and address Mrs. Deutschman's good question. And what I had before, can you see it on the screen there, is kind of a slide from the PowerPoint that we shared last meeting. And basically it's the big picture of a 5-year plan. And so for this coming year, 2013, 2014, basically we're extending the iPad pilot project at Citrus Springs Middle School to 8th grade. So that means in 13, 14, at that school, there'll be 7th grade and 8th graders using those devices. We're expanding the iPads to all the other middle schools at 7th grade. We're doing a pilot of iPads at an elementary school, a pilot of iPads at high school, roughly 1 grade, each of those schools. And so when it's all said and done, next year, 2013, 2014, we'll have roughly 12% one-to-one in our school district. I kind of, in fact, I was speaking with earlier prior to the meeting with somebody. I like this plan because I feel like it's conservative in the sense we're moving forward, we're not standing still, and yet we're kind of dipping our toe in the water a little bit more, and we're not diving in. And so this is still evolving. Standards are still emerging. Equipment is still, coming forth. There's no perfect plan. There's no optimal one device. And so that's all going to continue to emerge and change. And so next year we'll probably come back and say, based on this development or that development, this is what we're recommending. But what is clear is we have a mandate from the state to provide digital content. So it really implies we have to have devices to run that content. We have requirements from the state to do computer-based testing. And if we use our resources wisely, you know what? Those devices can serve multiple purposes. They can serve the students on a one-to-one basis to make that learning more engaging and more participatory. And they can also serve as testing devices, that will help alleviate some of that need that we have. And so that's kind of where we're at. Now, look at the next slide. This is kind of a refresher. And as expensive as this sounds, this coming year, we're only talking, well, I say only, we're talking about a capital budget increase of roughly $915,000 over what had already been budgeted. So it's a big number, but it's not as big as the numbers get kind of, down the road just a little bit. So I think it's a somewhat proactive and yet conservative approach, if you could say that in the same breath.
Dr. Giddison, will these hardware, they continue to meet the park testing standards, and for how long a time?
They do. They certainly, the iPads are kind of the device of choice for this coming year. For the most part, really that's what we plan and budgeted for. They do meet the requirements for park testing. To be totally honest, they don't, I mean, if you look at Florida Virtual, we're talking about some of those needs. Right now, their specifications require Java and Flash. It's on their website. And if you look at, well, we looked at CPOMs earlier today, resource from the state for teachers, as curriculum tool lesson plans. A lot of those resources require Java and Flash. So, you know, we're going to have to continue to monitor those kind of needs and requirements.
One of the things that I've talked about was that when they look at this, and Mr. Clark, you may have seen this as well, that when they look at Java and Flash, they tend to be standards that are next generation state standards, and that everything Common Core has been moved to the iOS device. And so as we're looking, we're still in a transitional phase of so much of that curriculum that's why we're still seeing, again, that crossover, that we're not quite to the, we're still having that Flash. And I believe Flash is not going to be supported after next summer, is the other issue of why they're pushing for that change. At least Adobe's announced that.
I was with a group over the weekend, some students in the school system, and they had an iPhone, an iPad, a Dell laptop, and they were doing different things, but one device wouldn't do what they wanted to do, so they had to go to the other. But they were going in 3 different devices, and you know, just what you were talking about, that one alone wouldn't do the job they were doing because it's more complex.
Yeah, this is
That's so true. It's
certainly I'm hit by 3
yeah,
different devices.
as I said, as things change, resources change, new developments occur, our plans are going to change. But we feel like this is a good plan that we're bringing to you in terms of moving forward from where we're at. And
so we can combine some of what we have with what we're getting, and like the students were doing, combine all 3 different things.
so other questions, does that help, Mrs. Deutschman, in terms of the larger picture? Or?
On this spreadsheet, let's go back to this. This is what was in our packet.
Okay.
You have that?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
so.
It wasn't terribly self-explanatory. The first part was, which was the iPads. But the second had a column for middle and a column for high with numbers, and they weren't identified what those columns
Let me
were.
just make sure I'm looking at the same thing you're looking at. Yeah, so,
yeah, that's it.
oh, that should be on there.
Okay, that explains it.
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause that's
I'm
what you
sorry,
just
there
said.
was and I don't have it on my computer to project for everybody's benefit, but yeah, that is
So that would be-
confusing.
So this would be the one-on-one
Yes,
project.
elementary and then high.
And then tell me again, you said one class.
Oh, one,
Elementary school's not going to be.
no, we talked about roughly 1 grade, but that's what we put for budgeting purposes. We understand probably the largest elementary grade that I'm aware of is maybe 130. And so a grade at the high school, 315 is going to be short, or 300 is going to be
All right,
short.
so
So,
when we're talking about one school, is only one elementary school going to be involved in the project?
yes, ma'am.
Really?
Mhm.
315, you can do 2 schools?
Well, 315, as I was saying, is probably going to be reduced because that was for planning purposes. We're going to need more than that to address the whole grade level at the high school.
And what grade level were you thinking?
We're waiting for their proposals.
Who, the high schools?
Can you remind the board the process that you're doing right now for that?
Basically, we have an application process. The application's out. Right now, it's actually due on Friday, April the 12th. When that application is returned, we have the Technology Standards Committee that was in place last year that reviewed the applications for the iPad project we had at that time. I do have a list of those names, not in my hand. But anyway, we develop a rubric based on the criteria of this application. And I believe I talked about that, some at our last meeting. And basically, we evaluate those applications based against that rubric we've developed and have a point scoring system and make a determination from there. Some of the large components of that is, what is your plan for training teachers? What is your plan for managing these resources? You understand what's involved and how do you envision yourself going about it? What resources do you have to contribute to this pilot at your school? And what resources are you willing to use and commit to that. It's a serious undertaking. And as we've learned, we haven't learned anything from Citrus Springs Middle School. We've learned it takes more time and resources and effort than you would think it would. It really does. So it's a serious endeavor with some great outcomes, you know, if you're willing to take that on and do it right.
Thank you, Dr. Geddes. Victoria Joseph is here, and she has put down that she'd like to talk about technology, and I'm just going to take her now instead of at 6 o'clock. Seeing how she's got technology on her mind here.
Hello,
If I see
Victoria
you walk out
Joseph.
like this.
Citrus High School geometry teacher. I'm talking about technology, and it's cool that you guys are having this because today, well, this whole week, I have been teaching the parts of triangles. And when you're doing this, the best way to teach it is to do hands-on or technology, actually both. So when you were talking about the chemistry and everything with that, well, with geometry, you need not only hands-on, but you also need the visual. Students aren't really auditory anymore. They're more visual and hands-on. They're more kinesthetic learners. And so it's very easy for me to say how it's done, but it's better if they actually implement it. So we, this whole week, have been constructing different types of triangles, different points of concurrencies. I know you don't know what that means, I'm sorry. Using the parts of the triangle, the median, the altitude, and all this. But it takes time when you have to cut out the triangles and you have to construct it. But it's still important. But then they can't see it visually anymore. They can only see a part of it on the triangle, on the paper triangle, when they actually construct it. So then if you want to explore more, well, what happens if you make it to an equilateral triangle? And then all of these things, all of these points of concurrencies become one thing, and they start to understand it, and they start to explore. For instance, when the point of concurrency for the altitude and for the perpendicular bisector, they're both on the outside of an obtuse triangle. Well, when they construct this on paper, on construction paper, they don't get to see where that point is because it's outside of the paper. But on technology, they can. So this whole week, I've been bad. I've been allowing my students to take out their cell phones. And because
that is good.
Because they have the apps to be able to, on their phone, to be able to look at it. Also, they're able to Google and understand the definition more than what the textbook gives them because it gives a little bit more. But still, it's not enough. Because, yes, on the cell phones, they can click on a vertice and move it around, but they can't change it into a different type of triangle and see it. So then I have to pull up GeoGebra on my computer to show it to them. And then again, it's visual and it's more auditory. It's not hands-on anymore. And if they have the technology in the classroom right there, the iPads, then they can actually, all of them, utilize it. Now, yes, could we go to the lab that whole week? That would have been great, but we can't because labs are all being used for testing. So by the time I get to this chapter, I can't go to the labs. So therefore, they don't get to use it because the labs are closed for testing now. And it's just, it takes up too much time to do construction and technology at the same time, where they can construct looking at an angle bisector on paper so they can still understand it. But to do the point of concurrencies, they really need that on technology.
Like a hologram, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just where they can actually see it. And then when we get to surface area and volume, see the three-dimensionals. Just the technology is really needed, especially in geometry. And I do know that they did mention that they said they're concerned about the geometry technology part of it for the Common Core because we really need that. So I like this. I hope I'm a pilot high school and a pilot teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Appreciate it. All right. So we have a motion. We have a second.
But we're not done discussing.
Do we have more discussion? Okay.
So that's a perfect, I didn't know she was going to say that, but my
I didn't either.
My question for high school would be that maybe do we need to look at the high school needs differently than elementary and middle? Because elementary, the kids are all taking the same classes, and at middle, they're pretty much taking all the same classes. But in high school, that's not true. And so to make it a grade level pilot, when you still have kids taking geometry or algebra 1 or algebra 2, biology honors, there's no continuity because you have kids in there that are of different grade levels that don't have an iPad. So how could you possibly do that?
Yeah, I think we would certainly be willing and open to looking at high schools. I'll give you an example. We're willing to look at elementary schools differently. And so when I've had a couple inquiries from principals, and so I've responded to those individuals. I had an opportunity today to talk to the whole elementary group. To listen, if it would be more effective for you, and you think you could do a better, implementation of doing classes from various grades, do that. So we're not really married to that or stuck to that. I think we would be open to.
Well, here's what I would like to see added to your criteria, is how is this technology going to assist in those critical classes where students have to pass in order to get a high school diploma? And that I would think that that should be the first criteria, not just part of their criteria, because if we don't make that our priority, then, and we're just experimenting with the technology, how does it work? We haven't accomplished anything, we haven't gotten anything as a result of it. If we're finding that the technology certainly enhances instruction to the point where it increases the student's ability to pass a course, and to pass an course exam, and then graduate and get a high school diploma, then that really should be, I would think, the #1 goal in how our technology is a tool, not a thing to, not the technology itself, but how do we use it?
All right. And I think all of us are of that understanding. That's why we're here. It's not the wow factor of technology.
So would you
is it how is it going to improve student achievement?
So could you think of this as curriculum based rather than grade level based?
Definitely.
Okay.
I agree completely.
Thank you. Thank you, and I'm sure the other math teachers thank you.
I think it's exciting. It's funny that very program that you mentioned, Joseph, came up earlier today in a discussion of administrators, and I was sitting next to one of my staff, Mr. Biggs, who's got a little bit of ADD, and I asked him, I said, "You paying attention, sir?" "Yes, I'm paying attention." But he was over there showing me on his iPad. He's on this one program where I wrote the name of it down. He actually did a square root thing with his finger, and did all this with his finger, and it magically transformed it to an actual calculation. And then on that actual calculation, he could actually extend it with his finger and make changes, and it's like pretty impressive. So, so I think it does open up a lot of opportunities.
Here's a slide ruler out.
Vic, I want to ask Vicki too. Let's say if you are short of iPads or whatever you're using, could you not use yours and project on screen?
Well, yes, and that's what I did today. But still, it's
not as good, but you can do it.
And not every student had a cell phone either, so I paired them up. So you can still do some things, but it's not as useful.
Not as good.
It's not.
And in terms of IQ testing, I used to always think that when you look at IQ testing, in part of IQ test, you'll have what you're talking about, triangles and stuff. You're supposed to state what the other side looks like. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking when you were saying that, and you explained it so well, and I could see that, I thought, what if that improves the thinking capacity of the students, because they have to now visualize that, and they're shown how to visualize that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, yeah, students have a hard time seeing actually the geometry, the three-dimensional, because it's all on two-dimensional,
right.
So it's hard to see the three-dimensional. So if you could actually turn it around, it's much better. So we used to always make it. That takes up too much class time to make it, everyone cutting it.
Right.
It's much better if they actually have it and can manipulate it and turn it.
And that was one of the things that was reiterated to us today by Mary Jane Chapin, Common Core. Kids are being required, not just to answer, but to understand why they're providing that answer. And so tools like that can really assist in that way.
Cells, little gray cells.
And you know, Dr. Geddes, we've talked about this, and I think this board is seeing that too. Developing that curriculum, transitioning that curriculum takes time. And that's why I know you talked about getting these iPads in the hands of instructors for next year so that they can start doing that. And we've talked about teachers like Miss Vicki, where they can begin that transition prior to them maybe having always that implementation, but where they can start using those tools, being comfortable with those tools, and then start that transition. So And I know that's really why I've been pleased with the way our district's approached this. It's been about trying to create models that are successful, that then can be duplicated throughout and replicated throughout our district.
Any more comments? Questions? All right. We have Mr. Kennedy making the motion. We have Ms. Powers seconding it hours ago, just for your refreshment. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Doherty and Mr. Kennedy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Attorney Legal Matters?
Oh,
That's in 4 minutes.
Oh,
I don't care.
you are right.
Yes, thank you.
Well, then I'll take two.
Okay.
I was just going to give you a brief update, and I know that I called when this originally happened, that the judge in the Duke Power case denied the motion to intervene by both the county and the school board. That order was entered on March 26th of this year. I have a copy of it. I'd be more than happy to make copies of it.
I know.
I've never had anybody tell me I talk too softly, so. But there's no need. Thought I would needed to come before you to see if this was something that you wanted to appeal or not. It's not something that needs to be done at this time. I spoke to the attorneys who are still involved, and they're not recommending appealing it at this time because it can be done at a later date. So there's no rush to do anything, and that's I originally brought it before you because I thought I was going to have to ask you if you wanted to appeal it or not, but apparently we don't have to make that decision.
It's a moot point.
Well, it's not a moot point because it's not. But as of today and as of the date of the signing of the order, we're not a party to the lawsuit. As their lawsuit progresses, they may come back and ask us if we want to appeal it, but they're not making that recommendation at this time.
How much money have we invested in this?
And can we get any of it back?
All that you budgeted, and no.
Really?
Yes.
They used all of our money?
Yes.
But Mr. Blocker made sure where they used that money.
Yeah, and there was we made sure that the board had directed that the money be paid only to the law firm that was representing the property appraiser and the school district and the county in our motions to intervene. And Mr. Blocker found that when we were getting some bills, there were some other bills that the county was picking up the tab on, but we were very diligent in only paying the ones strictly to that law firm as directed by the board.
We only paid Gray Robinson, and we have expended the approved budget amount of $175,000.
And how much did they go, how much would they have wanted had we had a more open-ended budget?
Well, there were several bills that we received from appraisers to helicopter rides.
Well, no, in addition to the attorney fees, did the attorney fees run over our?
The last invoice I got, I think there was about $8,000 more over the $175,000 I did not approve.
So they made a good estimate at the beginning, of how much it would take.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Dixon, public hearing.
Good afternoon.
Hi. Are you awake?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Just take me a second to set up my PowerPoint.
So while you're doing it, tell us about Mrs. Dixon.
She's hanging in there.
Is there a plan for her to stay?
She's the decommissioning manager.
Oh, yay. Okay, that's good. I know last time we talked, she was suspecting that would happen, but.
And did your daughter fence recently?
Yes.
Oh, is this the lead on?
His daughter's is one of the big fencing ladies for the University of Miami.
Wow.
And I think Virginia was one recently, did she?
She's been to a couple of tournaments. She really loves it.
That's awesome.
Now let me figure out how to.
Now we need to just have her come back and do a fencing workshop for some of our
Spaghetti's might be able to.
Yeah,
Mark, you want.
I see it right here.
Did we recess the regular meeting and then in public?
We haven't yet.
She will.
It's got to get set up.
Well, while he's getting set up, one thing that I needed to do was announce another attorney-client session for the E-rate matter. I'm going to do that for May 14th meeting, so you might consider what time you would like to have that. Yeah, I think last time we had moved the meeting from 4 to 3, and then opened the meeting at 3, and then at 3:05 went into the attorney-client session. So you may consider that, but after Mr. Dixon's done, I'll make my announcement for that.
Okay, all right. I'm going to close the
I think it's advanced.
public hearing and open. I'm going to close the regular meeting, and I'm going to.
You're going to recess.
I'm going to recess the regular meeting and open the public hearing.
I think for some reason it's advancing by itself here.
It has a mind of its own.
This will be quick.
Okay, start over. No. Go back to the beginning. Okay, I'll just begin by saying that, as you know, every year we look at the enrollment in January, and we advise you based on your work plan and on your enrollment changes and your projections for the coming year, whether or not we need to make any attendance boundary changes. This particular year, in order to coincide with the completion of Crystal River High School renovation, we looked specifically at the high schools, and we identified some changes that needed to be made in that regard. We also identified some changes that we felt like needed to be made in the elementary area, but when we talked about that in January, we decided that it would be best to hold off and see what happens in that area, and also with regard to the Floral City Sewer Project and some of the other elementary improvements that are proposed. So that being said, I'll walk you through the process. The purpose is to comply with minimum class size requirements to create student service areas that will allow for projected residential growth and to promote efficient use of transportation. These are your current high school boundaries. In general terms, these are posted on the internet. The purpose is to move students from Lecanto High to Crystal River High, approximately 125 to 130 students from the Citrus Springs Pine Ridge area from Lecanto to Crystal River High, basically the area that is west of El Cam Boulevard of Pine Ridge and Citrus Springs. And the purpose to move students from Lecanto Middle High to Crystal River High, approximately 0 to 5 students from one small area that was identified in Homosassa in both the high school and middle school attendance boundaries due to a map issue recommended by the transportation department. Basically, the road didn't go all the way through, and that area was identified. It's close to the new Walmart down on Cardinal Lane, and it's virtually no students are in that area at this time, but it would clean it up for future. And if you can see on this map that the road doesn't go through over to the Lecanto side, so that they currently we have to send 2 buses down there, one for Crystal River and one for Lecanto. And if we initiate this change, then we would only have to send 1 bus. To go over the timeline, January 8th, made a school board presentation and approval to proceed, where you discussed the report that was done in November, as well as the other information, and decided to proceed with the high school changes. We had our first public meeting on January 10th, following your initial meeting at Crystal River High School. We didn't have any public input from that meeting. We had a few parents attend, but no formal input. Then on February 7th, we had our second public meeting at Citrus Springs Middle School. We had approximately 40 parents attend that meeting, and we did have some input. And on February 12th, we agended the request for the public hearing today. We had our long-range planning committee review on February 28th. And then today, on April 9th, the final public hearing. And to go back over the public meetings that we held at the schools, the first one at Crystal River High School, we had no public input. The second one, we had 8 comment cards, and to summarize what we received, these are common issues that we've heard. Children of the same family attending different high schools, purchased home based on school zone. Children should be able to finish at high school in which they started. With regard to the purchase home within school zone, you know, we can't control how often we rezone. It's basically driven by enrollment changes. So we try to tell, I meet with the realtors, the new realtors in the county once a month, and explain that we shouldn't be saying or guaranteeing that, you know, any given neighborhood will be zoned for any given school indefinitely, because we're required now to look at that every year and determine whether those changes need to be made. Nonetheless, you know, some parents believe that if they buy a house and it's zoned for one high school, that they should always be able to go to that high school. And then...
Do you take the realtors, the snapshots that we have?
Yes.
Good.
I do have taken that Patrick gave me. As far as children should be able to finish at the high school in which they started, you know, we're recommending that the up-and-coming seniors are grandfathered in. Our projections are based on that, that they would be able to finish. But it would be up to you to decide if you feel that any further grandfathering needs to be done. But I would caution you against siblings, because that's a problematic area, and that it's hard to know what kind of effect that will have over time. But I'm certainly open to any options that you choose. I think that there's a lot that's happened since we started this rezoning process. You know, things are very fluid in terms of the community right now and what impact they may have. Progress Energy situation for one. I think another big one is the Suncoast Parkway. I think is a real possibility, and if it does materialize, then you know this could be important that we not keep the students at Lecanto if we need to have room in both schools.
Will, if it does materialize, will it follow the same path that the original plan through Citrus? I know that there's a change north of Citrus.
I think it will, for the most part, follow the same path, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, so we need to approve the attendance boundary changes.
So now you can move to approve the 2013-14 attendance boundary changes to address class size requirements and proper facility utilization levels of service.
Oh, yeah. Do we have any public input?
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Any public input? Third time's a charm. All right,
Now I'll second your motion.
Okay.
thank you. So we have a motion by Ms. Powers and a second by Ms. Deutschman. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon, outstanding work on this. I know this was a very complex package that you put together. I know you do this pretty much every year. You have to do a version of this, but this was a little more.
Not like that.
Not like this, though. Right, that was it. Thank you. My question is just within the report, and it has to just do with current 2012 enrollment, projected for 2013, and the utilization. And it's just a verification. Am I correct that while I think our totals show that we are almost 90% utilization for our elementary schools, and where our high schools I think are in a similar range, but our middle schools are, we have some flexibility in occupancy. If we were to need a school because we were to have some growth, or frankly if people just move back into some of those homes, do we look at the student numbers as a average of all grade levels, or are they looked at independently? So we may need, let's say, elementary school, but we could have, in middle school, quite a bit of utilizational space. That doesn't count, or do we have to count that in figuring out our elementary challenge, or are they looked at separately?
Right, that's one of the problems in trying to, we could have empty space in our schools in one grade level or in one school level and have them busting at the seams in another. And there's typically, the population moves through the school system in not in a straight linear fashion. You have larger groups of cohorts at certain grade levels and smaller groups of cohorts at other grade levels. So I think the next school that we're going to need is an elementary school. But Mr. Mullen may have some comments on this, because this has come up in the past where we thought we were going to need a high school, and then just a few years later we needed it.
I think your answer is exactly like you said. They would figure it calculated based on that grade.
Okay.
So elementary, we could theoretically have empty elementary seats and we could build a high school and get permission to build a high school, which you're asking. I think, is that what you're asking?
And it is, because when I look at, for example, and I'm thinking of the property that we purchased, I look at Central Ridge, 99%, Forest Ridge, 97%, and Citrus Springs is at 87%, although that school's not as conducive to, those schools all within that area
Right.
are busting at the seams. Now, I don't disagree with what our board moved with which was to hold elementary and just kind of stay. I completely agree with that. But as we look down the road in our capital improvement plan, it's clear, it seems like by, again, that elementary school has probably been a very appropriate, foreseeable site that we're gonna need at some point in the very near future. And so I guess I just bring that up so that people understand. By looking at it here, it shows we are busting at the seams a little bit here when it comes to elementary. And this is in a downturn of what people are often saying to us, we're losing students. Well, we're at 90% occupancy and that's including, by the way, Floral City, it's 76%, which is obviously making those numbers look that 90% look even lower than what I think it would be if we didn't have that in there. So I just think we need to, that's to me is a further justification and an appropriate of that purchase of that property made a lot of sense, and that is where that growth is showing us. So thank you with that, and thank you for the report in general. Thank you, Mr.
Correct. It changes. If you look historically, our numbers can change. We could come in here next year with a 5-year work plan that shows the need for an elementary school in 2 years. It happens.
Well, the other thing, this is based on cost size reduction numbers, not the
Right.
capacity for what the school was built for. So,
Right.
while it looks like the schools are really full, it's just that the classes are smaller.
That's right.
Well, that's the issue, is the 18 students. And as far as the property goes, the value of that property has increased a lot since you purchased it. So it was a good investment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Now, there's 3 parts to this. There's the elementary, adopt the existing elementary boundaries,
Okay.
and then the middle and the high, so as proposed.
We've got to vote 3 different times or one vote?
I think you can vote once, you just have to acknowledge all 3.
All right, so the elementary stays
As is.
as is. The middle school
Just the little
might be,
the change in Homosassa
right?
is the only recommended change.
Okay, I got it.
In the high school, that is also an area that's recommended to change, plus the larger area in Citrus Springs and Pine Ridge.
Okay.
As part of this vote, do we need to, I don't recall whether you have made the recommendation of how we deal with grandfathering in of students, or whether that needs to be also addressed at this time, or
We've never had that as a motion, we've just
Okay.
board's given us direction.
Direction on that.
Make
Okay,
sure
thank you.
grandfather goes in. And I know that we've dealt with some parents who have juniors, and we also have sibling guidelines, so check where we look at those on one-on-one basis.
We try to do everything we can to accommodate as many of those requests as we possibly can.
Thank you.
We have 16 outstanding requests in the rezoned area that are out there. Just so you know, there's not that many.
16 out of how many students are getting rezoned?
130.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we need to approve the revision of policy 4.11 student progression plan?
Yes, the next item is revision to 4.11. Basically, this is a revision adding citations 1.003.4156, general requirements for middle school promotion, 1.003.428, general requirements for high school graduation, and 1.003.429, accelerated high school graduation options. Also changed the term job entry to cooperative diversified education, CDE, and vocational to career and technical. Those are the only changes.
I move to approve policy public hearing, sorry.
Thank you. Any public input? Is there any public input? Third time. Seeing none?
Now I move to approve policy 4.11 student progression.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion by Ms. Powers and a second by Ms. Deutschman. Do we have any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Next item is revision to policy 7.70, purchasing and bidding. This policy has been revised to add information regarding the exception of bids, proposals, or replies to competitive solicitations from inspection and copying. And I believe this one is just a citation change and that one paragraph.
And Chuck, I didn't know what that meant, the last portion of it. Competitive solicitations from inspection and copy.
I think what this means, and Ms. Rundio's here, but it's when it's out for bid and the other, until it's completed, it's not a public record, so the other contractors can't see what each other's,
Okay.
can't see what each other's bidding.
Okay, do we have any public input? Any public input? Third time. Seeing none?
I move approval of policy 7.70, purchasing and bidding.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Ms. Powers? We have a motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Powers. Do we have any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
The next one is policy 7.65, anti-fraud. This policy was revised by adding citation 1001.421, which prohibits district school board members and their relatives from soliciting or accepting certain gifts. And this one was just a citation change.
Okay, do we have any public input? Any public input? Third time. Seeing none.
I move to approve policy 7.65, anti-fraud.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Powers and a second by Mr. Kennedy. Do we have any comments or questions?
They have to make a policy, so I would know not to take a
Oh,
bribe.
really? That's the first question you
Yes,
asked.
maybe. Bribe, no.
Yes, Pat, I had to.
Make it clear.
Make it clear. We didn't understand.
No.
What a world we live in.
Isn't that part of our South Florida?
It is, I was thinking the
No.
same thing.
You
There's
know,
this
but they
link
committed
there.
a crime. Do you have to have a policy that says you won't commit a crime?
I do
Yeah.
think we,
There's a change to the code, the ethics statute.
Which they're still rewriting.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
And the final policy change is policy 4.10, the curriculum. This policy was revised by adding a citation 1003.4203 in reference to digital curriculum, web communication, and web design for grades 6 through 12. And basically the changes as discussed, I think at your workshop, have been made on page 3 of 3, where it strikes the words films and tapes, because those are old forms of media, and just says any other supplementary instructional materials.
I remember doing that.
I move approval.
Did
Oh,
it-
I'm sorry.
Public input? Do you have any public input? Third time. Seeing none, Mr. Kennedy.
I move approval of policy 4.10, the curriculum.
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Mr. Kennedy and a second by Ms. Powers.
I just want to say, when this particular one, maybe be sure that everyone, all the employees get a copy of that or reference to a copy of it to read it, to, see what it says, so we have a policy that covers it. Particularly like they talk about controversial material or issues that are not directly or closely related to the subject area being taught.
You mean like email it to them?
It's something, yeah, please take a look at it. Vicki, maybe you can, maybe you could also,
Are you awake, Vicki?
Wake up.
Take a note.
Just so that all of our employees see the policy 4.10, the curriculum, because it does talk about issues, controversial issues, and how that's handled to present strict guidelines. Good.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you very much.
We'll close the public hearing and we'll reopen the regular meeting. Now, I have a question. Do we need a break? We'll take a 5-minute break. And then we'll come back here and hopefully.
I got a time certain roughly then.
6. Oh, that's true. All right.